that degree of attentiveness to her every breath and gesture and movement is rare outside of a kink context.
Our question today comes from Abigail, who told her husband over the last year and a half that she wants a dominant-submissive relationship. He's agreed to this, and he does engage, but the more they get into it, the less enthusiastic he seems. Abigail's husband has told her a few times that for him, a DS dynamic means that she gets on her knees and pleases him whenever he wants, and that she doesn't get much out of it in return. This is leading to a lot of frustration on her part.
Number one, they have not done the work to understand what each of them means by these terms. She has barely started the notion of asking, what does that mean to him? That, oh, it means I'm on my knees pleasing him whenever he wants, and I don't get much in return. What does it mean to her? I don't think it comes off that she doesn't really know. She wants something dom-sub, and maybe she has some ideas of what she would find hot, the particular scenes or particular fantasies or whatever, but she doesn't know why. She doesn't know what she needs to get in return. And so I suspect that when he says she doesn't get much or anything in return, he's talking about sexual attention or sexual pleasure. She could be getting in return the submissive pleasure of service and being useful and being pleasing. All of those are highly prized submissive experiences, but he has to give them to her in those contexts. So she may not get sexual pleasure, but that has to mean something. Orgasm denial, for instance, is a kink that it's possible that we don't know. She doesn't even maybe know, but
Right.
maybe she could be really into it and say, hey, but then him not giving her much in return, quote unquote, would mean something. It would be intentional.
Right.
It wouldn't be dismissive. It wouldn't be inattentive or uncaring. It would actually be them participating together in a sexual exploration of shared meaning. And so the same behavior framed in a context of meaning is very different. Now, what really comes across here is he just seems lazy. Being a dominant is a significant amount of work. And so maybe he likes the fantasy. Maybe he likes the fantasy, but he is not ready to take on the responsibility or the effort level to continue constructing a container of shared meaning for them to inhabit. And then she's frustrated because she's not getting her needs met, but it does require him to engage. And I think that making it clear that this is a deep need and that and a relationship ending need in a lot of ways is important for her to communicate, and then to say, hey, like, you can get a lot out of this, but you have to give a lot to get it. And if you don't, then the relationship's very much on the rocks here. And so that it comes off as a threat. It's not often received well because it is a threat, but it's also the reality. And so it's not intended as a control threat. It's just the fact that, hey, I have a very high sex drive. If I'm in a relationship with a woman and she just doesn't consent to sex ever, she just starts refusing sex entirely, look, it's not a threat. It's just, I'm not going to stay in this relationship. I also have the right to withdraw from this relationship if you've decided not to meet my needs, explicitly decided that that's not on the table.
There are several ways that a dominant could be very toxic and bad for a submissive. They could push too many boundaries. They could hurt her in a serious way, and all of those things. And this is another way. Being lazy
good point.
is also a bad dominance sort of thing. So a recent example for myself as well is I've been really busy this last week, and I'm currently seeing a submissive, and she texts me and asks for a list. I'm like, shit, did I forget to give her a list of something? And what turned out is that I've been so busy that I hadn't asked her to do anything explicit, like send a picture or do this other thing, something elaborate for my own pleasure, such as wear this particular dress and then send me a picture at this time or whatever, which is, of course, for my gratification, but it takes effort on my part to like, oh yes, I need to stop being all this busy stuff that I'm doing, and I need to make time for the submissive by making sure that I'm attending to her needs. Even if those needs are that she's serving me in some way.
Of course.
Because we are mutually serving each other. Me giving her instructions on what to do is also servicing her in, even if it's for my own sexual gratification, because that's what she wants out of the relationship. So if there's any way for this guy to reorient himself, is that he needs to really think seriously about whether or not her needs are being met, even if those needs are subservience to him in the form of instructions. For example, he, just like you said, he could do orgasm denial. He could say, listen, I've decided you're not coming for a week, or you will come if I feel like you're begging sufficiently. So why don't you just get on your knees and start begging? And then that entire enactment is an entire dynamic thing, but he has to stop whatever, drinking beer and watching football, whatever he's doing, and actually attend to her and say, no, I don't think you're really begging enough. Maybe if I spank you a little bit, you'll beg more, then I'll let you come a little bit, or whatever story it is that he wants to create. But he has to take time out of his day to dominate. That's the thing. He can't just take it for granted, just can't discard her like he's...
And to initiate, that's where it really... I've talked about this in other contexts, is that, yes, part of it is the effort of action, like she is giving him a blowjob. Part of it is the benefit. Okay, he's receiving pleasure out of it, but who started it? Whose idea was that blowjob? Who initiated? And that effort is actually not trivial in relationships. If he comes to her out of the blue and says, get on your knees and suck my cock, versus her coming to him and saying, I wish you would order me to suck it. Like, those are different people are putting the effort into getting the sex life going in a certain way, and balancing all three of those energies: benefit, effort of action, and effort of initiation. All three of them have to be attended to and balanced in the relationship as a whole. Now, you mentioned like the orgasm denial or that kind of thing. A lot of submissives experience benefit in the notion of providing a valuable service, a valued service. That, well, I provide my dom with sexual pleasure. I provide my dom with non-sexual service in a more traditional sort of 1950s game, cooking and cleaning or whatever, right? Or I provide my dom with the pleasure of my suffering for him, right? Is that he enjoys the torment of me not being able to come, right? Or he enjoys seeing me begging pitifully, and that enjoyment is what I'm providing. Another one is the benefit of feeling useful. That's a big one for submissive, is I feel useful because of what I'm able to provide for him or do for him or whatever. But all of those are interpretations and meanings that have to be explored. Is what does she want in a DS relationship? What experience does she want? She wants to feel valued. She wants to feel useful. She wants to feel at service. She wants to feel attended to, even just attention, right?
I was going to say, I was going to add, attention is a very big one, and he's not doing that at all. I think one of the biggest things...
If we're talking about probabilities, it's worth saying that if we're talking about probabilities, the majority of submissives I've ever met, the coin of that relationship was attention. Yeah. That's what they're after in some sense. Because if you're actually doing the whole dominance thing correctly, you are being very attentive. You're paying attention to your submissive's needs. You're like, okay, have I given her what she needs today? Even if what she quote unquote needs today is something that she's doing for you as a command. But you have to take time out of your day to give that command. You have to take time out of the day to receive whatever the command is that you've given her as well. You can't just to provide feedback and praise and say, hey, this was enjoyable for me. Imagine a woman who, let's say this woman, she takes deep pride in being an amazing wife and providing her husband with sexual pleasure and all these things. That's a deep part of her sense of herself and what she wants out of her life. Now imagine that he never asks her for anything. Well, she can do some, but imagine then whatever she does do for him, he never really acknowledges or thanks her or visibly enjoys. She cooks dinner every night and he eats it stone-faced and whatever. It's just trivial or expected, and there's very little engagement or appreciation. Man, he's destroying the core of who she is. This is not a trivial issue. This is not a small, well, I'm not that expressive kind of thing. It's like, you better get expressive, bud. Or marry someone else that doesn't have that investment in the notion of being a good wife. And so, yeah, the notion of being a good sub is to provide him with pleasure. And your sub even maybe asking her every day, what pleasure have I provided him today? And if you don't ask for anything, then she's left with the answer none.
Exactly,
and she feels less valuable, less useful. Her personal sense of meaning is being undercut. And that's a pretty rough place to be. So,
you've also talked also in the past about how when you're doing something like you're spanking a submissive or caning or whipping or whatever it is, you have to be extremely attentive to whether or not you are doing it too hard, whether she's truly uncomfortable, because she may not actually safe word or say the thing in the moment, but you could still read her body language, her facial expressions extremely carefully, and you're like, okay, I think that one was just getting a little bit too close to her wanting to safe word. Then, like when someone safe words, that's not a good outcome. That they should safe word if they need to safe word. That's 100% like we should say that. But then you've perhaps also crossed a line. You've perhaps done something that you have to stop the play, and that's not a great outcome. But if you are extremely attentive to like, okay, how did this land for her when I did this thing, when I spanked her this way? Was it too hard, right? So the next one, maybe now I should wait a couple of minutes before the next spanking. And those are all decisions that are centered on paying extremely close attention to how she's responding to what you're doing. And you've also said in the past in other conversations we've had, that kind of close attention is also the heart of romance.
It is, I think, in a lot of ways. I think that degree of attentiveness to her every breath and gesture and movement is rare, I would say, outside of a kink context. And again, I'm using my definition of kink, which is a bit broader in terms of even including things like love as a kink. But outside of that, casual sex, for instance, casual non-kinky sex, does not include that level of hyper attention. And I would say, too, going along with that, I think you can see even some of the differences in the reports of enjoyment between DOMs and subs. Subs often report that it was so enjoyable because I could just let everything go and drift. Right. And I could just experience. Subspace. I could just feel, right? Yeah, subspace is the far end of that continuum, so to speak. But the pleasure of dominance, dom space, so to speak, is a crystal clear hyper-awareness. It's a level of clarity where you know way more than you should know about her internal state, about her experience emotionally, physically, mentally. You are feeling her feelings. It's a level of empathy that is psychedelic in some ways. Yeah. And yeah, that difference between sort of unawareness and hyper-awareness is part of the exchange in BDSM context. Is the sub is basically just taking all of her awareness and giving it to you. And then she's drifting and you're hyper-focused. And part of I don't know, I've theorized, I've wondered if the thing that distinguishes people who want to be dominant from people who want to be submissive is which one is enjoyable. Is it merely, well, I like vanilla and I like chocolate. And it's like, okay, well, I like hyper-awareness. I like drifting unawareness. I don't know. It's one theory. But yeah, I think that there is something deeply romantic about a man paying that much attention to his partner and enjoying her reactions, her experiences that much, that he is constructing and conducting a symphony of experience for her in that moment, emotionally, physically, in all these different ways. She goes on the roller coaster, but he's the one who built it. In real time, he's building it as the roller cart. He's building it ahead of her as the roller cart is going, right?
And he's doing it safely, right? It's a wild ride, but she feels completely safe the whole time and attended to. He's remembered to fasten her seatbelt, basically, before he put her on the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.